And that's what they did. And when you shove that much potassium and phosphorus on the soil, you start killing all the life forms there. The American government said current American food is not sufficient for optimum health. That was, almost 100 years ago. Things have got much, much worse. Long-term veganism can be quite dodgy. B12 deficiency could take years for a B12 deficiency to catch up. So at what point will people say we can't fund war anymore? It's illegal. It's, the government's own rules say you can't fund, war and stuff. When will people decide, well, we're not paying tax anymore?
Hello and welcome to Resistance GB here from HOPE Freedom Festival 2024. Our next guest often gets quite into the medical side of things. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Clive De Carle, and I have nothing to do with the medical profession. Right? Everything I do is about health, not medicine. And 40 years ago, I took an antibiotic, really stupid thing to do. Next thing I know, I'm in hospital. I can't walk or get dressed. By that time, I've got rheumatoid arthritis so badly, aged about 31, that I look 90. And weeks in hospital, they say there's nothing we can do. I say it's the antibiotic. They say, no, it's not. They try to give me drugs. I say, well, I'm not low on drugs. I'm not deficient in what you've got to offer. My body is not lacking pharmaceuticals, so I wouldn't take them. But I read books, and I realized that I could check myself out of hospital and start taking vitamins and minerals and stuff, which I did, and all the arthritis went away. Now, the doctors say you can't do that. They said to me, you've got an autoimmune disease. How many people watching this have been told, you've got an autoimmune disease? I don't believe they exist. In my opinion, what happens is the doctors inject you as a child with some nasty product which damages you. Maybe it's the toxic metals in there, whatever. Then over a period of time you take a drug, like with me, an antibiotic or whatever drug, and now you have either a short-term or a long-term, what they would say, illness. You've got arthritis now. You've got an autoimmune disease. It's your fault. Your body's gone wrong. And I would contend that's not true, that the doctors and the medical profession have damaged almost everybody. So almost everybody has got something that their ancestors wouldn't have had, some autoimmune disease that is not that. They've been toxically poisoned. People are nutrient deficient as a general rule. We all are. And these days, because the soils have been so destroyed, the food is so processed, and many of the companies are so corrupt that most people are starving. And the more overweight people are, the more starving they are, because their body is going, I'm not getting the nutrition. And their body's saying, got to eat more. So they eat more processed foods, which are lacking in nutrition, probably damaging them, and they put on all this weight. So let's say you've got a toxin that the body doesn't know how to excrete. What does it do? If it can't get it out through sweating or peeing or pooing or breathing or whatever, what's it going to do? Well, a sensible body would park a toxin in fat. It's out of the way of the essential organs. So if somebody's overweight and they don't know why they can't lose it, it's really stubborn. It may be that your body is protecting you by keeping those toxins from getting into your bloodstream. So there are supplements and foods that can allow detoxification. I mean, a good example is sulfur. So you can get sulfur in things like liver, eggs, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, ginger, garlic, onions. But let's say somebody isn't actually majoring on those foods. What would happen if they haven't got enough sulfur? Well, they wouldn't be able to detoxify. Let's say, in the jabs, for instance, in most of them, there are things like mercury and aluminium. So those aren't water soluble. They're not fat soluble. So the body can't get rid of them in many cases. But materials like vitamin C, materials like sulfur are capable of transmuting those toxins into something water-soluble, particularly sulfur.
So it's a chemical reaction. So it's the way that different atoms come together to make a molecule.
Exactly.
So for example, water is H2O, which is 2 hydrogen and an oxygen. So this is making these molecules, making these combinations which your body can then digest.
Well, exactly. So if you combine a toxic metal like mercury with sulfur, it creates mercury sulfate. Now, the sulfates are water soluble, so you can pee them out. But sulfur does many other things, and the supplement form that most people use is called MSM sulfur. It's a powder or capsule. And let's say that somebody's got scar tissue. Maybe they've had cysts, maybe they've had fibroids, maybe they've had an operation, maybe they've got scars, whether visible or internal. MSM sulfur can turn those scars back into normal cells. So people taking MSM sulfur, they can, let's say they've got adhesions from an operation or, visible scar they don't like. Sulfur can fix that. And a lot of people aren't eating either a sufficient enough quantity of sulfur-containing foods, or it was grown in soil that didn't have any anyway. So what I'm trying to do is to point out that there are some incredibly simple things that can correct incredibly complex things. The first time I heard about sulfur was through a guy who explained that his son had got cancer, and I spell words like cure and cancer with a K for legal reasons, obviously, because the law is very specific about the words you use and how they're spelled. And he was researching, really desperate to save his son, and came across MSM sulfur. And his son is still alive now, 30 years later, or whatever it is. They give MSM sulfur to racehorses if they're in pain. MSM is used for racehorses. It's just normal. Tell you something else interesting that people don't know. Jockeys, professional jockeys, what they do before a race, because they want to lose as much weight as possible, is they have a bath in Epsom salts, because that dehydrates you, and they lose weight. So loads of people out there who are having a bath in Epsom salts, which is fantastic for detoxification, not realizing that they're accidentally dehydrating themselves.
I see. What other things are really important, would you say?
Well, magnesium's number one. And if you're going to have a bath in the stuff, a kilo of magnesium chloride before bed, fantastic. Personally, I take magnesium capsules, but you don't want to go to a supermarket or somewhere to buy them because they'll be rubbish and ineffective and probably just end up giving you diarrhea. But good magnesium supplements, and I manufacture one because that's really what cured my arthritis 40 years ago. Magnesium is so important. If you want, I can run through the magnesium deficiency symptoms.
Go on.
So one might have one or more of the following. It could be twitches around the eyes or anywhere, cramps, muscle cramps, menstrual cramps, spasms, headaches, migraines, epilepsy, heart arrhythmia, where your heart can suddenly race for no particular reason, restless leg, where your leg kicks out at night, constipation, heart attacks, what else? Nervousness, panic attacks, anxiety. Almost everything is based on magnesium. Over 3,000 functions that the body has, including digestion, healthy hearts and so on, is magnesium dependent. And because stress burns up magnesium, and the whole world is stressed way more than it should be, that means everybody runs out of magnesium. There's people who you see, they've dropped down dead in the desert, and we think, oh, it's dehydration. It's not. They've sweated out all the magnesium, and now their heart won't beat properly. Same with sportsmen. It's always at the end of the marathon or the end of the match that they drop down dead of a heart attack, because they've sweated out the magnesium and they can't function without it. So if anybody's depressed, magnesium. Can't sleep, magnesium. All those other things. And it's everybody. We're all low on magnesium because of the stress of the world and the fact it's not in the soils. So that's number one.
Sticking with magnesium for a little bit, is it possible to overdose on magnesium?
Well, I've never heard of it happening, but you can in a sense, in that the body, generally speaking, would be self-regulating with magnesium. So if you took too much at once or too much at one time, chances are you get diarrhea. But, of course, you can drown in water. You can get too much of anything.
So what is the standard dose that most people should take with regards to magnesium?
Well, it's super easy because with magnesium, like vitamin C, not all supplements, but magnesium, the body is self-regulating. So if you take too much at one time or too much over a day, you're in the bathroom with diarrhea. The body self-regulates. You can't have too much.
Generally, yeah.
Well,
so, yeah.
I mean, nothing's
Otherwise
100% perhaps, but...
why is it that the supermarket magnesium doesn't work or just gives you a dodgy stomach?
Okay, well, you can blend magnesium with amino acids. You can blend them with all sorts of different things. You can blend it with citric acid to make magnesium citrate. You can blend it to create magnesium oxide. And magnesium oxide is maybe, 5 times cheaper than all the other ones. Magnesium oxide, if somebody's constipated, great. But if you want to get a meaningful amount of magnesium into you, you're probably going to be in the bathroom, we will be, before you can ever get enough. Magnesium citrate is better. I do a blend of various ones, obviously no oxide, because it's rubbish. But I put in about 10% magnesium citrate because it's good for bowel movements, and a lot of people are constipated. But I don't want to put too much, because if I'm going to say to somebody, do what I do, I take 8 a day. Some people take more. It depends. I get muscle cramps if I don't take magnesium, and they're really painful. I wake up in the morning, it hurts. But if I'm taking magnesium, no muscle cramps. I'm relaxed, calm, everything's good.
Is there any concern, because magnesium is a metal, isn't it?
In its raw form, yes.
In its raw form. Is it dangerous to be taking a lot of these metals that could build up over time in your body?
Well, no, you need them. They're in food.
Yeah.
They're in the soil. You have to have them. What's interesting about magnesium is that if you've got the pure metal, you could set fire to it. It'll burn with a bright flame, right? You can make bombs with the stuff. With sulfur, you can mix it with potassium, nitrate, and charcoal and make gunpowder. Sodium, if you throw it in water, it'll explode. Potassium, throw it in water, it'll explode. We're taking in all these highly explosive, highly flammable minerals. And because we're mainly water, H2O, so we're mainly hydrogen, which is explosive, it's amazing we don't go up in flames.
Why is it that the soil is so deficient of the magnesium that people need?
Modern farming. Our ancestors, let's say really early, they would be relying a lot on the grass-fed animals. They wouldn't be digging the soil so much. Getting through a cold winter in England without animals, maybe, you still need cheese. I mean, you can ferment vegetables, but nobody's going to live well on those for 6 months by themselves. So we used to eat a lot of animal products because when the ground's frozen in winter, where are the crops? They're not there. Yeah, you could store the apples, but maybe you've run out. So I think that when that was happening, the soil underneath was fine. It was being manured with the cow shit. Everything was great. But the moment they ploughed, then the sun came on the soil and some of the microbes, some of the insects didn't do so well. Then they started putting on chemicals. At the end of the First World War, there were all the materials like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium were left over. All the stuff they made bombs with. Factories, massive factories making NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And what are we going to do with it? I know. Let's spread it on the soil, call it fertilizer, because a plant will grow on NPK. It doesn't need the other stuff. You can grow a good-looking plant. Yes, it'll be absolutely useless as far as nutrients, but they'll grow. And that's what they did. And when you shove that much potassium and phosphorus on the soil, you start killing all the life forms there.
So it completely unbalances the biosphere.
So now, back in about 1937, I think it was, the American government did a soil and nutrition analysis. And even then, in the 1930s, the American government said current American food is not sufficient for optimum health. That was almost 100 years ago. Things have got much, much worse. Not only that, for instance, when I was young, strawberries had a big center hull. Almost the whole size, maybe a quarter of the strawberry was the hull in the center. Now that's been bred out 100%. You never see that anymore. It's now all strawberry. So in hybridizing the strawberry and everything else they've hybridized, they've changed the mineral content, the vitamin content of the food. Big head of broccoli. My grandfather would not have known what that was. They didn't exist. It's only recently they've gone from being spindly things to dirty, great big things.
Well, you see what people have done with dogs and selective breeding. People say that tomatoes tasted completely differently and they look completely different. Many of our foods are unrecognisable from what they once were.
Well, if you go to a third world country where they're not using the genetically modified seeds and stuff, and still doing it the old way, you go to a market in the street, you can smell everything. Here at a supermarket, when do you last smell anything?
Yeah, because it's got a high water content.
Well, they spray it with Bill Gates's, I don't know, what is it?
They're putting some sort of form of plastic on the outside now, aren't they?
That's why apples are shiny. I talked to an apple farmer, so I used to be an organic farmer 20 odd years ago, 30 years ago, and I talked to this guy in the market and said, I used to be a farmer. What have you done to your apples this year? He started listing off this list of chemicals. We sprayed it with this and then that and then this and then that. And then at the end of it, we sprayed on the wax, of course, so the rain doesn't wash the chemicals off.
And you eat that straight out. And even if you were to try and wash it, if it's waxed on the outside,
it won't work. Yes.
Yeah, the water will just go straight off the wax.
But Bill Gates, Lord Saint Bill, he's got this new stuff they spray on vegetables that stops them deteriorating. So now it can be 8 weeks old and still looks fresh. What could possibly be wrong?
And obviously he's making a huge amount of money out of it.
No, he's a saint. He wouldn't.
People call him a philanthropist, but what he donates his money to is always very, very selective. And it's always the thing that's going to make him a huge amount of money from his next venture.
Coincidence.
Yeah, so it's always increasing. He's always getting more powerful. He wields all of this political power via his foundation. Even if all of his companies collapsed tomorrow, he'd still have all of that, or a lot of that political power from his foundation.
But the answer is so simple, which is that the directors of corporations should be individually liable for their actions. Can you sue Microsoft? No, they tie you up in court for 1 million years. You couldn't afford to win. But if the directors were individually liable of all the big corporations, then suddenly they would be personally accountable.
This is one problem that is a real sticking point within libertarian circles. It's the, corporate personhood and limited liability. Because the idea of limited liability is basically the state giving you the right to do wrong and limit the consequences to yourself at the cost of anyone down the street. You could take over a little area and let's say you've got a factory, okay? You could poison all the people in that area, but the most you can lose is the value of the company, basically. And then they've got something called breaching the corporate veil, where they can possibly go after the directors, but it's looked on as very crass. And I just think it's a bit alien, the idea that you can just limit your liability. Like if you go and you poison lots and lots and lots of people, there's got to be some responsibility. And I think the power of companies at the moment, because they're given this sort of state limit of liability, which is exactly the sort of the thing that they're doing with, all of Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, they gave them zero responsibility. And I don't believe they really have the authority.
Well, they don't. And we, the people, need to decide what we would prefer. I don't have any problem with Parliament because 600, if there were intelligent, wise people in one room, that might be a useful thing. But I do have a problem with civil servants who've forgotten the definition of the word servant. And imagine the parking wardens helped you park.
That'd be useful.
I mean, we've got 1 million or whatever public servants who have no idea who they're serving.
Oh, it's all a sort of payoff, isn't it? You've got more and more people who are dependent upon the state. And
Over half of the population are now on benefits in one way or another,
Yep.
which is state communism control, isn't it?
The whole population, essentially, because you've got this thing of the state pension, which is a massive, Ponzi scheme.
Oh, total Ponzi. They've got 10 days, if that, of money in reserve.
There is no pension pot.
No.
And unfortunately, there are a lot of boomers out there who are still, rabidly voting Conservative and whatnot because, we've just got to protect my pension. It's like, well, why don't you get your kids to look after you? And they say, well, I paid it for, the people before me. It's like, oh, yeah, so you paid it for a much smaller amount of people. I never consented to pay for something for you. If you've saved it, then where's the money? Where's your money? If you've saved your money, then I think you should probably be paying it off. And also, traditionally, you should have... sorry, there are kids outside. That's what you get with Hope. Traditionally, you should have kids and they should be looking after you. It just seems mad, that I'm meant to pay for someone else's grandparents.
Well, but in the old days, what would have happened is it would be communal.
Yeah.
Because, when my dad got really old, I'm just not the person to look after an old dad. That's just not me. I really couldn't have done him a good job. But the carer that we found, she did everything that, was necessary to do. But in a bigger society, if we were living in the village, there would have been the people who were absolutely cut out to look after old people. Then people like you who are cut out to do exactly what you do. And there would have been a lot wider than just the family.
Yeah. But I mean, the family should be at the core of it. And you've got a load of people who just aren't having kids and expecting everyone else to pay into this magical pension pot that doesn't exist to look after them and pay for this NHS that goes around poisoning people. And it's just a bit mad. Because I have no illusion there is no pension pot for me. I know there's no pension pot for people who are, in their 60s, 70s, 80s. But they're going to keep being paid out of everyone else's money. But by the time I get to that age, I'm stuffed. So I'm being told to pay into this grand thing for a generation that's squandered my inheritance and watched my country go from a quarter of the globe to a single set of islands.
So at what point will people say we can't fund war anymore? It's illegal. It's, the government's own rules say you can't fund, war and stuff. When will people decide, well, we're not paying tax anymore? Companies who have to deduct it say no. I mean, is that going to happen?
The problem is, this is what we saw in the lockdowns. It's much easier to go for the companies than the individual customers. So rather than go to each individual person and say, you have to put on this muzzle when you go in the shop, they go to the shopkeeper and they rely on them to police everyone who goes in the shop. Because the problem is, because people are so self-interested, fundamentally, this is most human beings. Like, how many people actually stood up during the lockdowns? Not the 99%, unfortunately. Most people, they might have skirted a rule here or there, but they only really cared about themselves. There's only, maybe 1 million, maybe 2 million, who even bothered going out and doing a protest, who actually bothered making any effort. And I know the sort of most of the core people, and it's just mad how small the circles can be.
But they should be self-interested because the government is stealing everybody's money.
But what if they're getting paid off by the government, then it's not really enough. It's not really enough. And also, if that business gets attacked, is everyone who shops there going to put in all of their effort to go and defend that business? No. Because fundamentally, people are cowards. Look what happened with Andreas Mickley's gym. He had a group of maybe, I think it was 12, maybe 24 people. I think half of the people didn't even go to his gym before. They just went to help him out of principle, but they're from across different parts of London, just to focus on this one gym in Wood Green. And obviously, shout out, if you're in North London, go to his gym. But his customers didn't stand up for him. The customers didn't fight. And unfortunately, they won't. So are we just in a situation where people are so self-interested that they'll sell out each other because they just fundamentally, they just don't care. They're happy with their Love Island and their one child that they can barely afford and their little apartment, so long as, they can, smoke a bit of weed and watch Rick and Morty.
I was brought up mainly by my grandparents.
Me too.
And my grandfather used to work, but my grandmother didn't. Her job, she knew, was to bring up children. And they had enough money to have a small car and own their own house with just one of them working. Yeah. How long ago was it that that was possible? Now they want you slaving at 2 jobs, all of you.
Yeah.
They put the children to work if they could. They just send them to the indoctrination camp instead.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it would be probably healthier if the children had work.
Well, in the old days, I mean, there is this thing that supposedly before the Industrial Revolution, children were just viewed as small people. It was only when the Industrial Revolution came along, and they'd go out to work. I mean, the baby would be on the back, and then when it's old enough, it would help. And it was just normal that they were small adults. Then the idea of children came out in the Industrial Revolution as a concept. I mean, I don't know whether that's true, but
I think it's partially true. I think there's a grain of truth in it. I think children were thought of as having a certain level of responsibility, which is significantly higher than now. I think there was a different understanding of the level of autonomy of a child. So there would be more punishment and also more responsibility on children, and they were expected to earn their keep because otherwise the whole family could die, the whole family could starve, and it'd been that way for thousands upon thousands of years. So they said, you are capable of doing work, you're expected to do some work. When you finally got to the situation when people became more affluent, then they get to say, okay, these children, this is a very special time in their lives, so they actually get to enjoy the luxury of this time and focus on their education, focus on having greater potential. But then you see that was hijacked by the state, right? With this state's maleducation and this indoctrination, which is, one of the core things that here HOPE is actually fighting against. But a lot of people are still sending their kids into the matrix.
it was one of the big mistakes I made, sending my kids to school. But I didn't know then how to home educate. I did a video with a guy a couple of years ago who's now started, I think, 30 non-schools around California. So by calling them non-schools, they're just places where children and adults come randomly. It's not school because they're regulated, and non-schools. And what he's done is over the years, decades I think now, he's got ideas how to educate children when it's raining. It's all child-led. The children make the rules. Who's going to do the cleaning? Who's going to do the cooking? Everything. So it's absolutely child-led. But when they've run out of inspiration, he's created, if you like, a big volume of ideas how to educate children if you're doing it yourself at home.
It's interesting being here at HOPE and being a tutor here and tutoring history. It's interesting that we do get to experiment.
Oh, good.
When I came in here, I said I want to tutor history and I want to tutor it chronologically. And because in the state schools, it's sort of Tudors, then it's Vikings, then it's Egyptians, then it's Industrial Revolution, and then it's probably Stuarts, then it's Second World War. It's all over the place, and I just don't understand how people could fully understand a historical topic if they don't go forward in time chronologically. Everything that we've gone through, we go through the thing before, and then we're into what we're doing now, and they understand the context of what came before. Or they may not understand it perfectly, which is understandable. Not every kid's going to get everything, but they've got a little bit of context, and that really helps, and they don't feel like they're just being swamped with everything. And it's just so positive, but they just don't do it in the state schools because they believe it can just be inserted, that it's interchangeable. They switch it around with geography as if they're equally important. Personally, I don't want to be harsh on geography, but I would say, especially for younger kids, geography, they should be learning that.
It's interesting, but history is vital.
Yeah.
Assuming you believe what the person's written.
Well, that's why you've got to look at different sources and think critically about things. And you don't expect kids to necessarily know everything. And you don't, but I got them to, argue with me about who was the first king of England. We were looking at Egbert, Alfred, and Athelstan. And my opinion is Alfred, and they were all going for Athelstan. I went, oh. We just started arguing. It was great.
When I was at school, by the time I was 11, I could tell you the dates of every battle that England has ever fought. I went to the same school that Prince Charles went to. I mean, the that we learned was ridiculous. I could ancient Greek, Latin.
Was that the one in Scotland?
No, that was Gordonston. I went to the one he went to in London for younger children. And, they wasted my childhood. I mean, I hated the first day at school and every day till I burnt it down. I didn't really. I just wanted to.
Well, I never really focus on dates. I focus on sequence. Because I think you can spend a lot of time learning some dates. I do say, okay, you've got to know the 2 world wars, you've got to know the dates for those, you've got to know the Great Fire of London, and you've got to know the Battle of Hastings. I say, look, there are a few ones that are required because anyone will quiz you and they'll think that I'm an idiot and I'm a terrible tutor if you don't know the dates for those. But if you generally understand the sequence of events, it's far, far more important than memorise this date, memorise that date.
And a lot more exciting and interesting because it's a continual story, obviously.
You understand what came before, what happened afterwards. It makes sense. You see cause and effect. Whereas if someone said, this happened at this date and this happened at this date, but you don't understand the cause and effect, it's a very low level, lower IQ. Not to say that any kid who does that, it's not great for them to do it if they're doing that on top. But I consider that to be going above and beyond. It's the sort of thing that you can check out, you can research later, right? Or they give you the date and you go, okay, this. Okay, I'm going to write this down. Right, I can reference the date there. But memorizing the date isn't the important thing.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. You mentioned that sending your kids to state school was the big mistake.
No, school in general.
So, what may I ask if it's too personal to ask what your relationship is with your kids?
I've got a great relationship because I've always been a rebel.
Yeah.
They're all really quite normal. It's in a nice way. They're all good. Yeah.
But you feel that you missed out on something?
No, if I knew what I knew now, I would have teamed up with other people who want to home educate and just home educated. I had an organic farm, so we were in the country, and it would have been fantastic, but I just wasn't together enough to know even where to start to home educate them.
Well, grandkids?
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to that. I've only got one at the moment. He's 8 months, so it's hard to educate him.
Oh, well, a future pupil.
Yeah, exactly.
But at least you've got that opportunity there, and you'll be able to keep them out of the system. And I just wish more people thought that when they sort of cared about their kids enough to take that time, especially when you've got a lot of people now moving in the homeschool direction, whereas before it was considered weird. Whereas now, after the lockdowns, it's considered just another option.
Exactly.
Which is nice and healthy, I think.
But I wouldn't want to teach the curriculum.
You create your own curriculum. That's the important thing. I think there are certain things that I think the state schools do right, and there are certain things that I think they do.
Really?
Yeah, I can say there are certain things that I think they do right.
Like what?
For example, right, I've worked in some schools. I know this isn't all schools, but what is it? I think it's Singapore Maths, right? Really, really amazing. What they do is they start with blocks, right? So they'd say, okay, we're going to talk about 6 add 4, right? So they'll lay out 6 blocks, and then they'll draw pictorially 6 squares to represent the 6 blocks, right? So it's taken from the concrete to the abstract. Then they're going to write the number 6, and so they've gone from these blocks to 6 on the sheet to the number 6. And then they're going to do the same thing with number 4, and they're going to add them together. And what a lot of kids have trouble with, sort of dyscalculia, or even if it's not categorized as dyscalculia, low level issues with maths, is they can't picture the abstract. So when you just put a load of numbers there, you just go, it's horrible. And one of the reasons I started getting bored in maths because I didn't feel that it was being applied practically.
Yeah.
If you create a real concrete link from a younger age, that can be absolutely fantastic. Another thing that is good in state schools, I would say, is there is a lot of writing. Now, I'm not saying there needs to be an excessive amount of writing, but I think writing every day, right, which is repetition, can be really good. And you don't necessarily have to do the writing that the state school wants you to do. It could be in different subjects, but having writing every day, written articulation of ideas, I think that's good every day.
Yeah.
I think state schools do far too much paperwork, far too much box ticking, but I also think checking progress of kids, because that can be really useful, like knowing where they are. And it also sort of having starters, plenary. So this is what we're doing today, starter activity. Off with the kids I tutor, when they come in, there's always a few questions from last week. And usually it's multiple choice. They come back in. I'm not going to sort of put them through their paces. It's just come in, go over everything to recap. Because again, repetition, recapping what we've learned from last week, at the end trying to sum up. I'm not as good at the summing up as I am at the recapping at the start, but it's good and it's very healthy, because I think one of the ways you learn, right, is you plant an idea in your brain. And as you go to plant it, like imagine like you physically are walking through this building and this building is your brain. So you would have to walk somewhere, or maybe this whole site, and you'd have to go and put it down. But then you come back to wherever you are now, right? If you want to recall that information, sometimes it's hard after you've just learned it one time, because you have to sort of trace your path back to find where you've got the information. The information's there, it's in your brain, but you have to find the path back to it. And the more times you tread that path back to the same information, the easier it is to recall. And so I think there are elements in that. Obviously, there's some variety within the state schools, but there are good things. And I don't think you should throw out the baby with the bathwater. But at the same time, oh my God, I could not work there. I could not ever work there again. Like, just the lies that they teach in history, the propaganda that they put in, they're busy radicalizing all of the kids, telling them the world's going to end in 2 or 3 years. They, the racism in there with their, Black History Month. It's like, oh my God.
It's like pride.
It's just so racist, right? And it's racist both ways. It's racist against black people and it's racist against white people as well. Of
course. It's divisive.
Yeah, it's just so disgusting.
It's amazing what gets its own month. I mean, what's the favourite deadly sin? Pride gets its own month.
Oh, and now they're pushing that on kids as well. And, I also think some of the attitude of the staff, the class sizes. The class sizes are ridiculous. You cannot engage with kids when they're that size. It's impossible.
What size are they these days?
About 30.
Yeah,
about 30 in, especially primary schools, it's about 30. Usually you have slightly lower in the secondary schools, but it really it does depend. You can't engage with kids. How can you do it? There are 30 of them. There's one of you and you've got an hour. Right? Just do the maths. The maximum, if you did no class-wide interaction, would be 2 minutes, including movement time. So you'd be able to talk to each one personally for 120 seconds, and that would be the entire session.
And how's home life? You've got start now.
Don't forget all your pastoral duties. Mate, that's mad. I think it's mad that when you've got kids in primary school, why are they swapping teacher every year? Like, I think if you've got a teacher who's spent a year getting to know them, just follow them all the way through, and because you've got a great relationship, and you really crack this kid after working with them for, 8 months. And then next month or two, oh, boom, they're gone. Right, they're off somewhere else. And, now they have to figure out this kid and this kid. What?
My youngest daughter went to a Steiner school where they did she had the same teacher right the way through. And she's turned out fantastic. The Steiner children are usually really interesting.
Yeah.
They see things differently.
Well, I think Steiner has some things to teach people, but they haven't. I don't think they fought back against the narrative in the same way. Like, although I don't know too well, but I know during the lockdown people were talking about Steiner schools and saying no, they're still going along with it. Most of them.
I can't speak for all of them, but yeah, quite likely, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, even the greatest people seem to have been brainwashed very successfully.
Well, do you think that the insanity that we're going through as a society could possibly be down to some sort of either toxin or a lack of nutrition? Could it be people going through the sort of throes of madness as they're sort of starving of nutrients?
I would say definitely both, yeah, absolutely. The whole world's damaged, unfortunately, and a few people realise it can be super easy to fix. I mean, my view is I am incorrigibly optimistic because the world is so dark and so bleak. If I wasn't optimistic, I'd be really depressed. So I'm happy to be told later, oh, you were wrong. The world is exploding. But I feel much happier if I focus on solutions, the answers, and not focus too much on the actual problems themselves, because, maybe 5% of my time I might learn about the problems, but then I'm knowing the problem, I then want to spend 95% of the time figuring out what the answers are. And over the years, so I've been going to some of these sort of freedom-type conferences for 40 years, the answers to every problem in the world are there. The whole lot has been sorted out already.
So talk me through a few more of these vitamins, because we made it through magnesium. So we've got through one. Talk me through a few more.
Okay. If anybody's got a problem that is worse in winter, you need vitamin D. Don't go to the doctor to get it, because you'll get stuff that will make you worse, generally.
So it's a lower quality vitamin D again.
If you go to a doctor, they're taught that you need to mix it with calcium. This is a massive mistake. Almost everybody's got more calcium than they could possibly need. What people need is magnesium. But most people think, oh, we need calcium. Doctors, the press, think, healthy bones, you need calcium. No, you don't. You've probably got enough calcium. What you need is magnesium, vitamin K2 and sunshine, or vitamin D3, to take the calcium from the arteries or the pineal gland or whatever part of the body is getting calcified. Arthritis is calcifications, and then inflammation because of the calcium. So why magnesium works is it dissolves calcium. It neutralizes calcium. So when I took magnesium, all the huge growths on all my joints just went away, because I was calcium dominant and I was lacking magnesium.
There's a lot of calcium in milk.
There is a lot of calcium in milk.
So I've literally just had a carton of raw milk here. So I really need magnesium.
Not necessarily. It depends what your diet's like and where you're getting your food. But, I mean, the symptoms we ran through earlier, if you've got any of those symptoms, twitches or cramps or spasms or whatever, then you probably do. You might not have the symptoms and still actually be a bit low, just because most people are. But everybody's different. Some people digest food so incredibly effectively that they can get away with being a vegan. Imagine that. But then there are other people who don't digest food so effectively, can't absorb it into the cells, and they need a more natural diet for a human being, which would include being an omnivore. You know, there are different diets, aren't there? There's like vegetarian, fishitarian, then there's Hillary Clinton's diet, humanitarian. Sorry, I didn't mean that.
Oh well, I thought it was just children that she ate.
They're still humans.
Yeah, but not all humans. It's more selective. It's more of a sort of niche type for Clinton.
Yeah.
Drinks the blood of children, I'm sure. So with vitamin D, I've got to say I was really shocked at the start of the lockdowns to find that 90% of people in the country were vitamin D deficient.
Sure. Well, they're inside in daytime. We should be out there farming and stuff.
Yeah, because that's mad. I mean, for 90% of the population, especially people with dark skin. And I remember one of the things that they were saying, oh, people with darker skin are, being discriminated against, blah, 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 racism, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, maybe it's because you've got dark skin and you've decided to live in a cold country with not much sunlight.
Yes, could it be that?
Could it be that? I don't get black people who live in Scotland. What are you doing? You risking yourself. It's mad. I couldn't live in Scotland. Yeah, I've visited even when it's been, nice weather. I still think I don't think I could do it. Man, I went to uni in Manchester, and that was, the North in Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones. That was going up to Manchester. It was freezing.
And Scotland's lovely, but half the time they seem to have midges which want to eat you alive.
So most people are desperately deficient in vitamin D. I know a lot of people who are quite pale avoid the sun because of sunburn, but I've heard about a link between seed oils and sunburn.
Well, seed oils are one of the biggest killers out there. Seed oils are damaging people's health. Even if it's organic sunflower oil, the extraction methods are usually really damaging and literally making the oil rancid, even if it doesn't taste rancid. But coconut oil is a fantastic oil to eat, and it protects you against the sun. Put coconut oil on your face. It has a reasonably good protection factor. If you have burned, you can put coconut oil on, and it'll help ease it.
Meanwhile, I've been told that suntan lotion is no good.
It's poisonous stuff. I mean, we're meant to get sunshine. The old-fashioned way was called sleeves and a hat,
So the best way is, if someone is really pale, go outside in the sun, but cover up. Then your skin will start to melanate.
Avoid the midday sun.
Yeah.
But you can build up. I mean, I used to burn really easily. Yeah. And then I spent more time in the sun. Now I don't really burn much. But I also know when to stop. I'm aware. But there's so many things. I mean, there's a product called astaxanthin, which you can get in various foods. It's good for the eyes. But there is I don't sell it, but you can buy astaxanthin as a supplement. And supposedly, according to Dr. Mercola, who's very good, he says if you take it for 30 days, maybe less, 3 weeks, before you go on holiday, then the chances of you burning are way less.
Wow.
Yeah. It's in fish and some shellfish products and so on.
Well, I know fish are quite good, aren't they, in terms of your diet?
I think about the best brain food you could probably get.
So a lot of people have been pushing veganism.
Like the government.
Yeah. And
they're on your side. They want the best for you.
So do you think the solution is to move towards something like the Lion's diet, maybe with a few vegetables included?
Well, I think everybody's different. Some people need a certain amount of carbs to be fully functional. Others seem to need a lot less, if any. I think all the strict fad diets are all dodgy and shouldn't be employed for everybody. I mean, a friend of mine was really, really badly poisoned, and he'd also got IBS, and he couldn't be out away from a bathroom for more than an hour. Otherwise, it's disaster trousers for him. He went raw carnivore for about 3 weeks.
Uncooked meat?
Yeah. And his IBS fixed in one day. And he just did that short term. I've had many clients who I've said, look, you really need to go raw vegan for a month. Can you do that? Maybe they've been really overweight. And actually for them, a month raw vegan was just what they needed. I've got friends who are vegans for 20 years plus. All of them gave up. Long-term veganism can be quite dodgy. B12 deficiency could take years for a B12 deficiency to catch up. Some doctors know, some don't, that B12 deficiency can lead to things like Parkinson's, dementia, and Alzheimer's. And it's not easy to recover from that.
And there's also the brittleness in the bones as well. And for males, especially boys, it can be extremely harmful. I think for women, apparently it's somewhat easier, but for men, I think it's particularly toxic.
So, we are totally surrounded by toxins, and it's super easy to get rid of some of them. Fulvic minerals, soil-based minerals, FULVIC. Fulvic minerals can be incredible.
But if are you worried about some people who are trying to make children vegan? Do you know?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But, we're meant to be omnivores. We really are. So, and I'm speaking to somebody who didn't eat meat. Meat didn't cross my lips for 25 years. Didn't eat it. Didn't want to. And then suddenly I changed my mind. But I did notice in that time, because I was mainly veggie, when I ate fish, I felt alive. I really noticed it. And then suddenly I started eating meat again after 25 years of not wanting to. I went to my dad's for Christmas dinner and he had goose. I thought, wow, that looks good. I never looked back. Then I had my hair mineral analysis done, which I do every now and then. And it turned out that I was really high in copper, which was interpreted for me as meaning that I wasn't getting enough iron in my body, and the body was compensating. And it was really weird because I was craving black pudding and steak, absolutely craving. So that's exactly what you need, according to my hair mineral analysis. And it was, hair mineral analysis usually like 3 months before, or 6 months, depending how fast your hair grows. But it absolutely picked up that I wasn't eating enough meat products at that particular time, 3 months prior.
And subconsciously you associate those minerals, even if you don't consciously think, you just think, oh, I fancy a black pudding, I fancy a steak, and that's what's going to give you
I think
iron.
our body completely leads us. I mean, imagine that suddenly money didn't matter and you went into the most wonderful food shop that you can imagine. The strawberries are just fresh from the mountain, still with the dew on them, and they taste wow. The raspberries, everything in there is fantastic. What if I said, okay, you can help yourself to whatever you like for a whole year. Would you have a little bit of everything? Or let's say the wild strawberries are in season this week. Let's say we're in the forest. What we would have done is we would have stuffed ourselves with wild strawberries, just eaten loads of them until we're absolutely stuffed, and then moved on to something else and something else. If food didn't cost a lot of money for raspberries, would you buy like 5 punnets rather than 1 if money didn't matter? I think we would be led, if we had infinite amount of perfect food, our intuition would say, I want that now and I want lots of it. Quite often I feel like eating a lot of one food. I like oysters. And then other days I don't want, I think, our body says you need this today, and therefore that looks attractive.
So are you familiar with the work of the Weston A. Price Foundation? Yeah. And I've got to shout out Phil Ridley for bringing me in on this, and his work going around and looking at societies, tribes, just before the roads came in the 1930s, when they did focus primarily on meat and then looked at all the conditions afterwards.
Well, in all his work, he never saw any primitive tribe who ate the natural diet having any teeth problems whatsoever.
Because he was a dentist.
Yeah, he was a dentist, and he noticed that they all had big, wide smiles, no teeth crowding. But within 1 year of feeding people Western diets, the children had shrunken mouths, where now you've got to take teeth out because there are too many. Teeth didn't used to be crowded. He saw people with green teeth, brown teeth, because they didn't brush their teeth with toothpaste. That's a new invention. And toothpaste is a really dangerous thing, or it can be. Anybody who's using fluoride toothpaste, think again. The fantastic thing about fluoride is that if you look at an antidepressant, most of them, the chemical starts fluoro something. So if you take an antidepressant, you're getting fluoride often. That's what the fluoro refers to. So you take an antidepressant, do your problems go away? No. Do the problems get better? No. But if you give fluoride to somebody, it makes you apathetic. And so the problem's still there. They just don't care the way they used to before the fluoride. That's why they don't want to put it in water. They want you to be apathetic and not be bothered to get up.
It's drugging up the whole population, or part of the population, because they haven't fully rolled it out. But I believe it was Gove who was pushing it for the whole country, or someone like him, some of our rats.
So the old picture of fluoride generally had the words rat poison and a skull and crossbones on the front. You can go online and see it.
So if people are pumping in water and it's got fluoride in it, should people even bother paying their water bill?
No,
it's undrinkable.
Absolutely not. I wrote to my water people years ago saying, look, chlorine is a poison gas. My grandfather told me, he was in the First World War. I can smell it coming from your water. I can't possibly drink that.
Oh, speaking of chlorine being poisonous, swimming pools use chlorine.
They do.
What's the situation with those? Should people stay away?
Well, I had the parent of a 13-year-old girl who's training to be a professional swimmer or Olympic level or whatever. So she goes swimming every day, and she was getting all sorts of physical problems, dry skin. She couldn't think properly. Temperature was going out of whack, all sorts of issues. And I immediately said, it's the chlorine. And so now she takes some iodine, Lugol's iodine, and a drop of selenium before she swims and after she gets out. And within, I think, 2 days, loads of her symptoms have gone away. Then we fine-tuned it, gave her a little bit more iodine to take. And as far as I know now, I haven't spoken to the mum for a couple of weeks, but I think she's got it sorted. Chlorine depletes iodine. Women and men, most iodine is in the thyroid.
Yeah.
In women, most iodine is in the breasts. So in Japan, where they eat so much iodine in the seaweed and the sea fish with every meal pretty much, they get so much iodine that menopause didn't used to be a word that was recognized in Japan because the menopausal symptoms didn't happen because of the iodine, and breast cancer is really rare there.
Wow. And so were women fertile for longer?
Probably.
Interesting.
But, iodine deficiency is massive, absolutely massive. Everybody with a thyroid issue, as I say, dry skin, brain fog, menopausal issues. And it's so cheap. A bottle of Lugol's iodine, which will last a year, is like 25 quid. I mean, and they used to sell iodine in chemists until about 15 years ago when they took it out. And iodine's been used since 1811, if I remember rightly.
I was actually looking for some years back, and it was, you could only get the supplement pills. And they were very, very, very low doses, because in the event of a nuclear explosion, iodine is what you want, because it's the iodine that you pick up from the environment that goes to your thyroid. That's one of the main ways people die. That's one of the main ways they get radiation. So you want to take iodine pills, which overload your body with iodine in case of emergency. And that way you don't take in any more iodine.
Yeah, the iodine receptors are full.
Yeah.
And there's nowhere for the radioactive
so
stuff.
It just flushes through your body so you keep safe. And it was just, a bit of light prepping. I thought, why can't I get this? Why can't I get hold of it?
Because it cures things. A lot of people with breast cancer, for instance, a lot of them painted on the skin, right on the breast. But you've got to be careful with iodine on the skin. I would say 1 person in 10,000 has a reaction. I've had 2 clients over decades who have called me from the A&E. They put 1 drop on, which I recommend as a tester, and it burnt them. Super rare, though. Taking it with water is safer.
Oh, it's good they tested.
Yeah.
What else should people go for, would you say?
Vitamin C. Vitamin C is the answer to almost everything that magnesium can't fix. Vitamin C can, and the two of them go together. If you haven't got vitamin C, the magnesium won't work so well, and vice versa. So I think my favorite story is probably a video, 4 minutes long, reverse pneumonia in 3 hours, where Dr. Andrew Saul realizes he has bacterial pneumonia. So bacteria for pneumonia is really fast reproducing, and maybe every couple of hours or something, I don't really know. He took 2 grams of vitamin C, that's the equivalent of half a teaspoonful of pure powder, every 6 minutes with water. And that's not easy to do. 3 hours later, all the pneumonia symptoms have stopped. His temperature's dropped 3 degrees. He's feeling energetic again. 3 hours, because he'd outraced it. If bacteria reproduces every 2 hours and you hit it every 6 minutes, you could win. And people die of pneumonia. People are in hospital for months with that. The doctors don't realize that probably 6 decades ago, they realized that intravenous vitamin C could turn off, for instance, septicemia. People die from sepsis. Intelligent doctors who've studied, and they wouldn't have studied it in medical school, will have learned that vitamin C is dose dependent or illness dependent. So let's say you and I are eating a fabulous diet. We don't need vitamin C. We don't need any supplements if it's fabulous. But let's assume it's not. We might need a quarter of a teaspoonful twice a day to boost us up to what would have been natural. But if somebody's got a really serious disease, they might need 100 times that much. Sounds ridiculous, but there are people who've been told, you've got cancer, you're going to die tomorrow, and they've been given a big intravenous drip of vitamin C, and they haven't. They've survived. The first time I ever saw terminal cancer reversed was kidney cancer. A friend of my dad's, this must have been 38 years ago, he told me he got cancer for the second time, and he'd already lost 1 kidney. He said, well, I don't have a spare, it's the only spare one I got. And he knew what I'd done, which was vitamin C, magnesium and stuff, but he went way further than me. He contacted the father of vitamin C in one sense. He was on the front page of Time magazine, I think it was. The only person to win the Nobel Prize twice as an individual, Linus Pauling. Finds him in the phone book, rings him up in New York, says, I've got cancer for the second time, what do I do? You're the vitamin C expert, would that be a good idea? Linus Pauling says, take 35 grams of vitamin C in divided doses every day. When he died 20 years later, it wasn't from cancer.
Wow.
Yeah. So some of these things are super important. I mean, just ridiculously important. Yeah. Even sodium bicarbonate, for instance, simple sodium bicarb is an incredible remedy. 150 years ago, 130 years ago, probably, if you looked at the Merck manual, Merck, the drug manufacturers, there, before it all went chemical, every natural herb and everything was in the Merck manual. And all these things that I've discussed were there. Bicarbonate of soda had like 120 different issues that it could remedy.
And they removed it.
Of course.
Because it can't be patented.
Of course.
So where is it you got a lot of your information just researching over the years? Since you took that antibiotic?
Yeah. No, getting ill, illnesses don't happen to you, they happen for you. Either the illness is, right, you've got to go through this nightmare so that you can then recover and teach other people, preferably how not to get in a nightmare situation in the first place. So, I was lucky to be really, really, really ill. And it was horrible at the time. But, 15 years ago maybe, I was studying cancer survivors. I wanted to know the ones who lived long-term, what did they do right? And I was expecting vitamin C and vitamin D to be at the top. And I was totally shocked by what it was. Pretty much all of them, 9 out of 10, said the same thing. I asked them, what was the turning point? When did you know that you were going to survive? And they all said pretty much gratitude. They said, I got to the stage, like I am with my health issue, that I'm grateful to it because now I am doing what I'm doing, which is very rewarding. It's a lot of fun, a lot better than I was doing before. So the sooner you can get to the gratitude stage of seeing the benefit from being ill, because illnesses happen for you, to teach you, change your diet, take some step to deal with the trauma that you're either doing physically to yourself by eating rubbish food all the time, or just get yourself sorted out. Health problems happen for you, and you either change or you suffer.
And you've helped out thousands of people so far. How many would you say?
Well, I mean, one of my videos before the government told me to take it off YouTube, it got 250,000 views. That was 2014. So I don't know how many people.
Well, but how many people have you directly spoken to, sort of one-to-one, and given advice?
Loads. I mean, in places like this where I'm giving a talk, usually I'm surrounded by 20 people who want to know about their aunt's cousin's dog who's got a tumour or something. So I talk to thousands of people, but I stopped seeing clients as my regular thing just so I could get it out on video to a wider audience. Because why talk to one person if you can talk to 100?
I see. So people need to focus on their nutrients. Do you have a book where you outline a lot of this?
No, I've tried writing a book several times, but I'm just not very good at that. But talking I'm quite good at. So when the government shut me down in 2014, I started something called secrethealthclub.com, which is a private members club. Because in a club, you can say whatever you like. In the bigger society, you're regulated, but in a club, you can, relatively speaking, do whatever you like. So I thought, well, they've taken me off YouTube and stuff. So for the first couple of years, I just gave away membership for free. But they had to sign the one rule, which is they have to be in favor of total health freedom, which I felt one rule ruled out all the bad guys. If you're not in favor of total health freedom, well, you can't join. And so now I charge an annual membership to it, but I'm very clear that if people can't afford that, it's £86 a year, just for run the staff and so on and keep me in food. But anybody who can't afford it, they can have the membership for free. They just write to me, email me, or they can say I can afford 20 quid or whatever it is. So information ought to be free, but it costs money.
Yeah, I wish we could do this for free. Shout out to anyone who wants to help us out on Patreon.
Yeah, help them out. Yeah.
But one of the problems that you're facing is this regulation, because a lot of people are going through the state system. A lot of people are going through the universities. Doctors who question things are struck off. They're defamed. They have their businesses shut down. They're dragged over the coals through the courts. They could be stitched up. You're fighting an uphill battle. Do we need to move back to a free market in medicine so that people will have the power to vote with their wallet?
Well, I mean, let's say we had the choice. Everybody should get A&E. That's obvious. But if we had the choice between going to a doctor as our first choice and going to a health specialist as our first choice, if the money that they spend on our behalf on the NHS was spent on supplements, you'd have 90% of that money left over, because prevention is better than a cure, obviously. And so if they changed the rules so that farmers could transition to not poisoning everybody, if the corporations, particularly the supermarkets, were given personal liability rather than corporate liability, so, if you're selling me poisoned biscuits, I can do something about it. If your oils are actually rancid, but at the end of the day, we're in control of our own lives. If you go shopping, try and support the local farmer, cut out the shops, try and find somebody who's growing it naturally without chemicals, buy it direct, share. I mean, a lot of people want raw milk, which is hard to get. But if 10 of you got together as a group, you could have it delivered and, you could share it out, buy things in bulk, so much cheaper. I mean, I buy things like beans or lentils or whatever in bulk because they keep forever if they're dry, and it's so much cheaper, And also I sprout things, which is another way to have really cheap food. You take some lentils, for instance, or chickpeas, and you soak them in water for half a day or so. Then in a jar each day, you just wash them a couple of times, and within 3 or 4 days, say mung beans have now become bean sprouts that you get in the Chinese restaurant, and like 5 peas worth of mung beans will now have gone from a little layer to like 2 quid's worth. I mean, they grow so quickly. And almost any beans, with the exception of kidney beans, which would be dangerous, you can store pulses, buy them buy the 25 kilo, last you a lifetime or less. But I mean, there are ways to eat really healthily and cheaply. When I'm in the mood in winter, I'll get various seeds that are good for salad, like garlic seeds, onion seeds, broccoli seeds, alfalfa, whatever. And I just sprout them for a day or maybe 2 days, depending on the weather. And now I've got a fresh salad, absolutely full of nutrition. I've grown it myself. It's alive as I eat it. You can hear it complaining. Yeah. Don't eat me.
Okay, so wrapping up, people can find you at...
Well, I've got 2 websites.
You've got 2 websites. Okay.
Secret Health Club is where the information is. And if you want information just on the supplements, there's a £1 membership fee. We actually have to charge £1 to create a contract. Then there is my supplement website where we can't tell you anything that's of any value, hardly. The government allow me to say about 10 things that magnesium can do. Government approved facts, but the rest of the truth isn't government approved. So that's on the Secret Health Club. But the supplements themselves, and I do quite a lot. A lot for detox and a lot for putting the nutrition in. You can buy them there online. But the Secret Health Club has the information. And if you join the Secret Health Club and pay the money, then you get a 10% discount on the supplements. We usually do that. I'm not sure whether we're doing it on individual stuff, but there's financial reasons why it's worth joining the club.
Well, it sounds like a good club to join.
Well, it is. I mean, the information there, some of it is mind-blowing. I mean, they're videos of children aged 4, 5, blindfolded, they can see nothing, who can see everything blindfolded. You can teach children how to see with another mechanism in the body. I learned this about 40 years ago, because I used to be in ophthalmology, and I learned about Russian children blind children who've been taught to see with their fingertips. So we have all these crazy abilities that most people have no idea. And the children can learn it often in 5 minutes, not all of them.
Well, it's the Earth's magnetic field. So some people can tune into it, or maybe all people, you might say, there might be.
Probably.
But it's what bees use to navigate. Birds. How do birds always get to the same place? Yes, they do use a few landmarks here and there, but no way are these birds...
To fly across oceans to Canada every winter.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, well, this is the right piece of sea that I'm flying at. They've got it in their brains. They've got they've got a compass in their brains. They are basically flying along these magnetic lines, and they know where to go.
And you see it with cats who get lost 200 miles away and find their way home.
And what they do is often they'll sort of turn around. And, dogs do that. They'll run to somewhere, they'll turn around, and they argue that is them anchoring that as a point within their perception of this magnetic field.
Oh.
So they've got this magnetic field. If the dog runs like sort of or stops in a circle before, and it's like, that's a marker. And it's weird because we don't really have the access to that. Or I know I don't feel that I really have access to that, but I know some people do to a sense. I think maybe it does exist. There's always a sort of feeling of I sort of know where I am.
I think that's right. I mean, I've observed that everybody has healing powers coming out of their fingertips, if they choose to believe it. Some have to go on an expensive Reiki Master's course to be convinced that they can do it, because they learn all these techniques. I think everybody can heal. I don't think you need to be a Reiki Master to do it.
Wow. Okay, on that thread, we shall end. So, secrethealthclub.com and...
CliveDeCarle.com.
CliveDeCarle.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Will.
Thanks for watching. Please give us a like, a share, a subscribe, hit the notification button if you would like to help. We've got a Patreon and a Subscribe Star, so please head on over there and pledge us some support if you want to keep this journalism going. We've got a professional studio here, and we could do with your support to keep these great conversations coming. Okay, word association. First word that pops into your head. Freedom.
Delay.
Tyranny.
Too much of it.
Hope.
Loads.
Justice.
Ooh. If you mean the justice system, crap.